The Prepper Podcast, episode 29.
We've got to know whether or not they're prisoners of crime.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said, under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
The Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military, wilderness, and modern-day survival and may be found at theprepperpodcast.com. I am Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. My goal is to teach you strategies on self-reliance and to develop survival skills and critical thinking in everyone, resulting in a more resilient and enjoyable life. This is episode 29, and today I am going to have a great topic for you guys. I actually have a guest in today by the name of Vaughn Cassidy. Our topic today is going to be drills for stress inoculation and combative scenarios. The show notes for today's podcast may be found at theprepperpodcast.com/029. And if you want to be a guest on the Prepper Podcast, just go over to theprepperpodcast.com/guests. And you can fill out the form there. I get it directly to my email, and I can contact you about becoming a guest on my show. I do enjoy doing listeners as guests instead of just experts. Okay. Here last week we had a meeting at a local prepper group that we started. I know that I announced it on this podcast that I was going to start one up here in the local area, and we had one where we actually did some canning of salsa, and that was some of the best salsa I've ever had. We're going to post photos of that on our Facebook group. I'm not going to tell you what that is because it's a local group. It's not meant for the general population, but you can find it if you just look at the groups that my personal profile is a part of. Also, go to iTunes at theprepperpodcast.com/iTunes and go ahead and give me a rating. Make that a 5-star rating if you don't mind. Also, I have updated the Survivalist blog with a video of mine and Jen's anniversary. This is our 9th year anniversary, and we had a lot of fun during our anniversary. I compilated a video of just what we did on our anniversary, so go ahead and check that out, and I know you guys would actually enjoy that. You can see all my videos if you go to cleversurvivalist.com/video. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and go into today's show. Like I said, Vaughn was a great guest, so let's go ahead and get into the meat of the subject. Okay, guys, with that, I'm going to bring on Milton Vaughn Cassidy, and we're going to talk about stress inoculation. How you doing, Milton?
Good, pretty good. Please call me Vaughn, if you don't mind.
Just Vaughn?
Yeah.
All right, we'll go by Vaughn. And I guess today we're going to be talking about drills for stress inoculation as it relates to combative scenarios. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, well, first off, Milton, you've been involved in the survival arts for how long?
About 22 years.
About 22 years. What else are you involved in as far as the martial arts and health and fitness?
Well, I am I'm a de facto CrossFit instructor almost, because I drank the Kool-Aid on that with the CrossFit stuff several years ago, and I began to relate a lot of it to martial arts and how it could help martial artists, because When you go into a martial arts dojo or dojang, whichever language they're speaking, Korean or Japanese, whatever else, you go into a traditional martial arts studio, usually, and all apologies to everyone out there, but usually the heaviest, most out of shape guy in the room is the instructor. And I think that is absolutely atrocious and needs to be fixed. So CrossFit type things, which also Insanity Workout, also P90X, and several things like that. They're there to, in a safe way, stress you out. So I began to relate that to all right, fitness, all right, stressing you out. Let's do this in a constructive manner with martial arts and not have a rote, regimented, dead pattern of movement, but have them be more realistic and more alive. And you would be amazed, people, I'm probably getting ahead of myself here somewhat, but be amazed people that get out of breath, their pulse goes up, their blood pressure skyrockets when they're doing something in martial arts that they're not accustomed to, they're not used to. And those are good things. And how to do that positively and constructively without tearing a student down or stressing them out too much is sort of been the wave in martial arts for the last couple of years. Right.
Okay. And you also told me that you're currently writing a fiction novel.
Yes. I'm about 165 pages into a novel that it's sort of an adult vampire story. Why I say adult is because a lot of the things you see, vampires are not from Abercrombie and Fitch. Vampires are evil. They're monsters, and classically, we need to return those guys back to that. Because I think we're, as a culture, getting too used to vampires and the occult as being something that is innocuous, if not, almost folksy, and kind of we're too comfortable with that kind of stuff.
Right. So you're just trying to change the persona away from somebody with their body covered in glitter over to more in line with even before Interview with the Vampire, when they went back to Dracula and things like that.
Yeah, sort of. What's going on in the story? And I know this is the primary subject matter, but in my story, in my mythos of the vampires, the first vampires were the Roman soldiers that crucified Jesus.
Right.
And I can't think of more horrific start, really.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's pretty horrific. All right, and just so that everybody has a nice round background of you, what is your profession? Because I understand that although you're martial arts, you've been in martial arts for a long time, and you are basically an instructor in both martial arts and CrossFit, that is not your daytime profession.
No, my daytime profession is as an environmental consultant, although I am a government employee. I hope that doesn't cast suspicion on my way with a lot of people, and I totally understand if it does. But all of us out there are not there to just regulate the stew out of the public and choke business off. A lot of us are there to help. Mostly what I'm doing, primarily, I've got some things that I just have to do by statute, but mostly what I try to do is assist any level manufacturing environment with finding a recyclable and hopefully profitable end use for their waste material.
Okay, so you are essentially a professional environmental consultant and a waste reduction specialist. Would that be a good way of saying it?
Yes, that doesn't make anywhere near as much money as those guys out there in a private field.
Okay, well, it sounds like somebody needs to go private.
It does.
And just so you know, I'm going to say a minimum of about 40% of the people that are in the survival community start off in government because they realize how ridiculous it is and that something has to be done, and then they start getting into that movement themselves.
Right.
So they kind of drink our Kool-Aid because they are the ones in the know about how ridiculous things can be anyway. So I'm going to say probably half of the listeners could probably care less that you're an actual government official, in that sector. They realize, that sometimes people in the government are actually in the know about different scenarios.
Exactly.
So, on top of that, where do you train? Where do you train martial arts at?
My garage mostly, but I also train at Photoshinka Dojo, which is in Jackson down here, off of Campbell and Highland.
So Photoshinko?
Fudoshinka.
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 Okay, Fudoshinka. In Jackson, Tennessee.
Yes.
Right.
Which is primarily a Kenpo school. There's also Kempo, but this is Kenpo.
Okay. All right. So I know that I asked you on the show, but what made you interested in coming on the show?
Well, the primary thing, and I often sound negative, but I really am trying to help people. What I've noticed, I watched, and not that this is even a decent slice of the community, but I watched Doomsday Preppers, and I watched some of the things, and I see a lot of people that are, in my opinion, neglecting combative training when it comes to survival. I understand it's maybe 5% of it. I mean, it's not going to be the zombie apocalypse all the time. But if I respect those people, or respect the community, and if I can in any way assist them at all in becoming more realistic with their ability to defend themselves, then that interests me greatly.
Right. And if you've heard any of my podcasts in the past, you'll realize that I don't really think that, kind of like you, I don't think the zombie apocalypse is going to come upon us, and, women and children are going to be crying in the streets, and homeless people are going to be running around ransacking everybody. I don't think it's going to be quite that bad. However, we do understand that with economic turmoil comes lower income, and with lower, or at least income that's worth less. And with that is going to be more people breaking the law and breaking and entering, and you need to be able to protect yourself in a stressful situation. And these are very real situations now, so what makes you think that it's not going to be a real situation when people are actually struggling for food for their their wife and children, or their spouse and their children? And it's really important. I've already hounded on situational awareness before, and I explained to people that you need to be aware of your surroundings. And I agree that a stress inoculation style training would help you in a stressful situation. But let's we don't want to be in those situations anyways.
Exactly.
All right. So can you go ahead and tell us what stress inoculation training is?
Well, stress inoculation training, of course, any martial arts training, is for when you have already violated 3 basic tenets of survival. You're in a stupid place, which could be, just unbeknownst to you, you just happen to end up there. You're there out of poor choices, or you're there because you were forced to be in that situation. So stupid places, you're doing something stupid, which you can avoid that. And then you're with stupid people. So stupid places, stupid things, stupid people.
Well, that's funny because I've actually said that before. Don't be in stupid places with stupid people doing stupid things.
Exactly. And and everybody, we may end up being one of those stupid people. But anyway, basically stress inoculation is, when you come right down to it, you're going to default in under stress. And it could be a car wreck. It could be a number of things. It could be a house fire, a number of things. You're going to default under high stress to the things that you have already ingrained, and you've got to watch out what you ingrain. You've got to watch out what your gross motor skills have become, because here's a bad example, horrible example of a training regimen that really has cost people their lives. It's going to be unbelievable with a lot of folks, but I can have you talk to folks that have done this. When you are doing combative training, not necessarily fighting, just doing some combat training, and you're ramping up a little bit, and you're knocking somebody down, or you're tripping them, or you're shoving them, or you're throwing them to the ground. And usually it's a mat or outside in the grass where it's not hard pan or anything. You help them up. Well, because it's courteous. I know of police officers who have gotten into altercations and actual fights with people, subdued them, and then helped them back up to get reattacked. So one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to get to a point where you can think. Now, one of the things to do is, of course, drop that whole habit of helping each other up when you do this kind of thing.
Right.
But a lot of stress inoculation is of course, and it's a bit of a misnomer because there is no inoculating you from stress. It's getting you able to deal with it better. There's lots of good positive stress.
One way the Army calls it is they call it immersion training.
Yes, exactly. So one of the things that you can do, and of course you can do this in any number of ways, you can put on headgear and get back against a padded wall, get shoved by a person with pretty good padded gloves, learn to cover up and just take about 50 or 60 shots, which is hard for people to do. I mean that's the thing where you start breathing heavily, you get tunnel vision. You get this immediate flush of weakness. Okay, these are the things that we want to avoid. Now, you're never going to be able to just just hang out, and it's just always like that because you and just be able to think, well, big deal, I'm getting the crap beat out of me. You don't want to do that, but you want to be able to think your way through it and sort of see it in somewhat objectively, somewhat dispassionately. And you do that by, number one, you can go through these scenarios again and again and again and again and again, which is a lot of folks don't have that kind of time. Or you can get in extremely good physical shape in which your body handles that flush of blood pressure and that jolt of a pulse and that flush of weakness a lot better. And you can think on your feet in almost any situation a whole lot better. An example of a stress inoculation drill. I just gave you one. You can get in persons, and everyone's familiar with MMA. You get in a person. You put them in the guard position, which is where you're on your back, and you put on headgear, and you allow them to just pummel you, just hit you and hit you and hit you and hit you and hit you. Another way to do this kind of thing is with tactical sense in mind, with weapons in mind, is to go through a combative scenario fairly quickly, like a punch, choke, bear hug, and then tackle, and keep trading being the attacker, being the aggressor, being person that receives, and then decide who gets to get up and walk up to the firing range about 10 feet away, pick up the weapon, shoot off about 6 rounds at a certain target, put it back down, and then you measure how well you're doing. Because I would think the first few shots when you get out there and you're nice and fresh, you're going to be pretty dead on. And after that, it's going to start degrading a little at a time. Right. And these things don't have to go on for an hour because there's no sense in putting you through that kind of thing. 20 minutes, max. I think you're probably pretty stressed out.
Right. So can you really mimic the stress of combat, though?
Not really, because somewhere along the way, your brain is always telling you, I'm with somebody I trust. I'm with a friend of mine. I'm not really in danger. These aren't real bullets for using an airsoft gun. It isn't a real knife. The person really isn't trying to actually hurt me. I know people that, are all for keeping it really, really, really real. Well, that's also keeping your medical bills really, really, really high too, because you get hurt.
Right,
Um,
right.
you know,
Um,
um,
well, with that, I was gonna say, I know that two of the best ways of mimicking stress for someone in a combat scenario is airsoft or paint gun or your paintball gun, with minimal padding. Just make sure that you keep your headgear on and of course keep your cup on. But
right.
if you use minimal padding, you know that stuff's going to sting. It's going to almost feel like a rubber bullet, and you don't want to get hit.
Exactly. Pain is wonderful. Pain's a marvelous teacher.
So I know that you talked quite a bit about the scenarios of stress inoculation. Um, we talked about a typical training scenario. Is there any more information that you have on a typical training scenario, besides getting to a little bit of a fight and then shoot a gun down range? Is there anything else that you can think of that would be a great stress inoculation?
Well, in general, you can mimic the metabolic stress by just doing, like, say, I don't know, doing a set of 50 burpees or a bunch of pull-ups, whatever. You can do it that way, and it's constructive. You're getting a lot of good exercise there, and then dropping down and either adding that to the combat play, and then shooting a weapon, or then doing something else like I don't know, sighting a compass or something like that, or anything that you might have to do under stress pretty quickly. Um, the only other thing I would say is that you really need to be careful if you really have any sort of cardiac or cardiovascular issues, because this can get pretty scary. You need to get with people that have done it before, and you ease into it. You do 10%, whatever you think it might be, and then you go up to 20%, and then there only should be just a few reps, a few cycles of all out,
Okay.
because you really can get hurt. I mean, guarantees are for toasters and televisions.
Right. When you get stressed and tired, you get dumb. And that's the whole point of the training, is to make you less dumb when you get stressed and tired. And I would
Exactly.
imagine if you did a bunch of burpees and then got into a confrontation in your training, and then you went and you shot your handgun or whatever you needed to shoot. If you did all of that, then I would imagine that you are doing a really good job mimicking the exhaustion that you're going to feel in a real confrontation.
Exactly. You're mimicking it metabolically, to a large degree, but I mean, like we say, you're never going to get Marine recon level, because people are not allowed to shoot at you with real bullets
Right, right.
unless they have, unless they work for the government, certain parts of the government.
So the stress inoculation training could be extremely beneficial to someone. How are you going to ensure that you stay safe? Because we know that an idiot that wears themselves out and then they get into a fight with their friend and then they go and pick up a gun and shoot themselves in the foot. I mean, how are you going to stay safe during stress inoculation? How are you going to keep yourself from, you don't want to break an arm in the process. How are you going to keep safe?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to both pretty much trust each other. I mean, it's the hard thing about it. I mean, as I said, guarantees are for TVs and toasters, but you really need. I mean, there are certain individuals that I have met that I just won't do this with. They just don't have enough control. The younger they are, the worse the situation is.
I resemble that remark.
Well, no. You're in your 30s. I'm talking about a person in their late teens, early 20s. Forget it. I mean, I almost would insist that they just don't do this yet. Or you just put on the whole gear and just spar. Just go ahead and fight. That's what they're going to want to do anyway.
Right.
you go through the drills, and there's nothing, there's no way to avoid having to learn some sort of combative scenario where I'm going to hit you with my right arm, and I'm going to do it in such a way that you're going to be able to block it.
So slowing it down,
Right.
less force behind it, everything
Exactly.
else.
Mm-hmm.
So
of course you crank it up. Now every person, if your grandma at 60 years old wants to get out there and do this, she does the exact same thing that your 20-year-old nephew does, just at a much slower, much lesser pace.
right, you've got to give them a longer training curve so that they can get up to speed. What is the advantage of going 100%, to going full force, full speed, offensive and defensive? What's the advantage of that?
If you are doing something where you've got a lot of complex motor skill involved, there's no advantage at all, zero. The only thing you would get out of that is you would just learn very quickly that a lot of the stuff you learn in typical martial arts is incidental, if not accidental.
Well, I think that right there is a huge thing to learn, though.
Right.
I think that once or twice, somebody probably will need to go full force, because you need to realize that it's not the same. I mean, I've said it before, but martial arts is exactly that. It's an art, and if you end up training on the point system and stuff like that, and then you get caught in a real life situation, well, now you're thinking, well, don't hit them here and don't hit them there and don't kick them like this, or else that's a penalty, because that's what's been ingrained in you. But then you get into a real situation and you have to fight against somebody who is going to grab you in the nuts. To say it frankly, they're going to grab you in the nuts, and they're going to twist and pull, because that's something that works. And they're going to hit you in the face, and they're going to try to, if they know what they're doing, they're going to hit you in the throat, and they're going to pick up something and start banging on you with that.
Right. No referee, no timer. There's no ring. The surface, you don't get to choose your surfaces. I mean, a lot of stuff is what you end up with a lot of the stuff that you learn is you learn what I and folks that I train with call the myth of the first event. The myth of the first event is you may have already gotten punched a couple times. You don't get to just grab his wrist and twist it in this nice, cool little martial arts hold that they've been training with for hundreds of years. It works, and it works great. But you've got to be in the position and in the correct timing to pull that off. And what you're saying is right. The common moves that anybody can do are the ones that you do full force, all out. Jab, cross, hook, bear hug, choke. Of course, all these things have done with some control. I mean, you wouldn't want to choke each other out. I mean, we've done that a few times, and it gets old pretty quick. So you want to keep those moves down to the very, very basics. Not that people can't pull off a lot of very complicated things, but look on YouTube. And unfortunately, let me tell everybody, if you aren't comfortable with violence, extreme violence, maybe you should watch out what you see, because it's somewhat disturbing. In Brazil, for example, there are several videos of MMA fighters, guys with belts, guys with championships under their belt, going into gas stations and getting into it with people and getting the stew beat out of them.
Right.
Just because they're thinking one-on-one, they're thinking take somebody to the ground, they're thinking 2 or 3 shots and it's over. And these people get hit in the head with a 2x4 simply because they didn't turn around and look behind them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we know that some people just have no mercy, and when you're used to being in a cage, even though, you're this awesome athlete when 3 or 4 people are going to sneak up behind you and cut your kidneys, then you.
Right.
I mean, there are several times, I know, you can get 2 guys together and let them fight it out, and they know that they're sparring. Okay, so it's not a stressful environment. They're actually just sparring like they know, and you can go around, just go around with a marker, and you can cut them and cut them and cut them and cut them, and you'll be able to show in a typical fight. You'll easily show them 20 or 30 marks where you cut them and they didn't even realize you were anywhere near them.
Exactly. You cut yourself. When you're fooling with those 2 magic markers, get a color for each person and see how many times you cut yourself.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Maybe like a paint stick where paint's all over it.
Yeah. And get blue for you, red for me, and just see if you cut yourself.
Yeah,
because you'd be amazed how many times you will do that.
You know what? That's something for us to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Try something like that at some time. Do you know how stress inoculation enhances your situational awareness?
It does, because most of the time you can say to yourself, I've been here before. This is my neighborhood. I hang out here. At least sometime I've visited here before several times. I know I can think beyond somebody just cussing me out. I can start looking around because I think I don't have tunnel vision. I'm not deathly afraid. I'm not paralyzed with fear. I'm afraid because I don't want to get hit, and I don't want to go to the hospital or to jail.
But it's a healthy fear.
Yeah, exactly. It's a healthy fear. You're just as afraid of what you can do to them to get in legal trouble. And the thing that you learn, at least at some level, even though you have to actually think about it, you have to actually talk about it, is distance-wise. How did I get this close to you? How did I get up on you this quickly? Mm-hmm. How did I appear out of nowhere? Why are you cut off? Why do you only have one exit? Why am I standing in front of the only door that is your way out of there? And you can think that way. And it's awful. It makes, when I first started doing this, I began to think, well, gosh, I'm gonna die from stress. I'm gonna walk around terrified all the time. Well, no, actually, you don't. You're not afraid of tornadoes all the time, but you have to know shelter. You're not afraid of getting a flat tire all the time, but you ride around with a jack.
Right, and that's what I tell everybody about about survival and stuff like that. The reason why we do it is to get rid of that fear. I mean, we know that we're ready for things. The first thing that people are supposed to get prepared for is the loss of a job. But that way, that you have, cash saved back, and that you have food, and that your family is going to be okay while you are looking for the next occupation. So the first thing that you got to do is you're doing it so that you're not in a bad position. And when you're not in a bad position, then there goes that fear.
That's funny. I just now thought of a verse in the Bible. Proverbs 31 talks about the woman that's really good to find. And it says she stores up food and she smiles at tomorrow. It's pretty good.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in there where they're storing up food and stuff like that. So with that, it enhances your perception, and it enhances your analysis of dangerous situations.
Right.
And that's just because you can think on your feet, because you could be in a chokehold, but you've been there before.
Right. Of course, the object is not getting in a chokehold in the first place.
Right. I don't want you within 10 feet of me.
And it's awful, because one of the first things you learn, it just flies right in the face of common Western politeness. When you're approaching me and I ask you to stop coming up to me on the street or something, and I yell at you and you keep coming, that's it. I mean, it's on. I mean, you need to get out of there. Just get, because this person is committed to hurting you. So that's one of the first things you learn, is to yell. Stop. And if the person doesn't do it, well, you got problems.
Yeah. Let's see. That's typical in defense as well. You yell at them because a lot of times, at a minimum, you'll cause them to back up or stumble, because they're not used to somebody just coming at them for full force with a yell, telling them to stop.
Exactly.
Telling them that you mean business.
Yeah, and
And
we're too polite. We're too polite, Ken. I mean, I can't stress that enough. We're people die of politeness. They die of shame and they die of politeness.
Yeah, in those situations they do. Um, Not only am I going to yell stop, but you're going to have a barrel in your face.
Yeah, and when you do this sort of stress inoculation at any level and you do it enough, it just magically shows up one day after you've done it for a while. I say no more than a few months. You can recall what happened. Why did you stick this gun in this guy's face? The officer says, and you can articulate yourself better because you remember what happened.
Yeah, and that's a really good takeaway right there, is because, I mean, a lot of times if you just say, I don't remember, it's going to be hard because, let's be honest here, you end up taking somebody's life, you're going to be in court.
Exactly.
And even if you're in a state in which they will almost look the other way, because there are some, and Tennessee's one of them.
True.
They're almost just going to look the other way, and you may not end up in court, but chances are is you could end up in court. So you need to be on your feet, and you need to be able to think about what's happening.
Right, and if you're on the other end of it, Ken, if the gun is in your face, and I mean they don't have to kill you. The gun's in your face, and then it's over with. The cops show up and say, "Well, what did he look like?" Well, he was long and black and round.
What did he look like? I don't know. Rifling?
Yeah, exactly.
What about so it sounds like most people want to throw themselves full force into an actual fighting stance scenario. It sounds to me like your first thing may be to take those airsoft guns or something like that and work on keeping the person away first.
Of course, exactly. I don't know why every self-defense program I've ever been to, except for the few that I've with my instructors, this is where I got all this knowledge from. We start off as this person magically just grew up out of the ground 2 feet away, and you start off with punches and grabs and chokes and all that stuff. You never address the fact that, well, how did you get this close to me? Why are you here? The first lesson I ever learned was a person stood across the room and they said, and this is in a movie called Red Belt too, by the way. Red Belt's a cool movie. A person stands away about 15 feet away and they say, "Can I hit you from here?" And I say, "No." Take another few steps. "Can I hit you from here?" "Well, probably not." "Can I hit you from here?" And then you have to say yes. And then they say, "Don't stand there."
That's kind of common sense. But it sounds like, they wouldn't teach that if people didn't screw that up.
Oh, yeah.
So that's common sense. Man, I did a little bit of prep work, of course. I wouldn't be doing a good interview if I didn't, but I was doing some research on the effects of stress inoculation for post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you have any knowledge on that?
You know what? Honest to goodness, Ken, I don't have much knowledge on that at all. It sounds great, but I can't talk about that intelligently. I'd love to learn more.
Well, it seems as though it's actually, obviously, we've got military training and stuff like that, and by doing the stress immersion, they end up kind of like what you were saying. You just automatically snap to a position of recall, and you start recalling the motions, and I've been here before, all I've got to do is do this, and they almost disconnect themselves from the emotion of the situation.
Really?
So they don't end up in an actual PTSD issue later on. And then there's actually been some research that says that post-traumatic stress disorder, if you actually have it, there are some things that say that stress inoculation will lessen the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder after you've already had it.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So,
yeah, but do you want to work out with a guy with PTSD?
No, not really, because something's going to end up. Yeah, he's going to end up freaking out and snapping on me.
I would, because if he took bullets shot at him for my sake, I'll take a busted nose. I'll do it, but I won't like it.
Well, I don't want to do the stress inoculation because, what are the chances that guy is going to just go ahead and snap my arm because he doesn't know where he's at?
Right, exactly.
So, speaking of pain, what is positive pain reinforcement?
Well, positive pain reinforcement, basically, I mean, it's somewhat of a negative, meaning it's a bit of a misnomer, but your mind is not going to forget that. Your mind is. I mean, my grandpa told me when I was a pretty young kid. He said, Vaughn, I picked up a hot coal one day and no one had to tell me to put it down. So you understand, you can relate the pain to the situation.
That sounds a lot like my dad growing up. Oh yeah, let him pull the TV on his head a couple times. He'll learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Positive pain reinforcement as we grow up. Is there we talk about stress inoculation, and we've talked about martial arts, and we've talked about combat and stuff like that, and we've got hand-to-hand combat, we've got knives, we've got guns, we've got long distance, and with all of those different things, is there a difference between the stress inoculation for martial arts and a typical combat scenario?
There shouldn't be. There really is no typical addressing in a traditional school of inoculating stress. There should be. You have to get to a certain rank to start really learning all that stuff, and it really should be one of the first things that you learn. That is changing somewhat. If you look at a martial art called Kali or Silat, the way that it is taught by a lot of the instructors, because, and I know I'm bragging on my own art, I apologize, but you've got a pretty good intersection there of empty hand, knife, stick, and now in the past several years with the gun as well. So they do address all those things. And it is a war art. There are other war arts, of course. So they don't really take it from a scenario of point sparring at all. Although I'm not against that. I mean, I think point sparring is fine. But if you're going to rely on that to get you out of the gas station when it gets robbed, it's going to fail you.
So there should be no difference, but we know that in reality there is a difference. Combat scenario training, they typically do a lot more stress inoculation, and in martial arts, like you just said, they don't do nearly as much. And when they do, it's usually more controlled. I mean, you go to boot camp and you have actual bullets flying over your head, and you're told if you stand up, you're dead.
Yeah,
it's a little bit different.
Yeah, at some point. Well, now you gotta take into account the person's personality somewhat. But what you do is any certain thing, any weapon, any type of combative scenario, even in a typical school, martial arts school, you really should. Most folks are not aware of this, but good teachers do it anyway. Even though they aren't aware of it, there's something called the I method, and you introduce a move from a certain situation, then you isolate it so that you're familiar with it and understand what to do, and then you integrate it into everything else you're doing. So it's introduction, isolation, and then integration.
All right. Well, then how are you going to take a skill, and we just talked about this just now, but I want to go a little bit more in depth with that.
Okay.
How are you going to take it from a traditional martial art to real world effectiveness?
From a traditional martial art to real world effectiveness, I can tell you right now, anybody out there that's ever taken any kind of traditional martial art, whether it's wushu or jiu-jitsu or kenpo or anything like that, every move you ever learned works. It actually works. It really does. You just got to test it against a progressively resisting person. You end up with what we call dissecting the corpse. In most martial arts schools, the person stands there and lets you do it to them. That's the first thing. That's introducing a move. Then you isolate it. Well, we're going to do just this one thing over and over again until we feel pretty confident with it. And then the integration part of it is, now I'm not going to let you do it.
Right, but it seems in typical martial arts, I mean, they have all those steps, but the integration is what's lacking. They integrate it into a tournament situation instead of combat. Right,
exactly. How do you safely train this stuff? It's hard to articulate on just by voice. I have to show you, but one of the things you do is you do learn some drills that the person that is the teacher training the person can sort of feel how nervous or how tense somebody is. You get your arms tied up in this thing called hubud, which is only a certain distance away. It's like elbow range almost. And hubud means to tie and untie, and hubud is just like it's spelled. It's Hubud. If you get on YouTube and look that up, it'll show you. You can do it with sticks, you can do it with knives, you can do it with empty hands, and you can do it from trying to draw a gun. And it's a drill that you can learn and ingrain in your mind. And then what your goal is to do is to leave the drill. So you got the drill, you're doing the drill, 4, 5, 6 moves. I do my 4, 5, 6 moves. And then somebody very creatively and at first very slowly introduces some chaos into it.
All right. I was watching the show on Discovery Channel a long time ago, and they have these people, they put them in a real world disaster scenario, and they had these things called marauders. And what the marauders were is they were there to introduce chaos. These people they had engineers and mechanics, and all these people came up with all these creative solutions to things. And then sometimes the marauders would show up. Obviously, they were told not to hurt the people, but they would push them and stuff like that. And these people, they did not hold back. I'm surprised that marauders didn't get killed in the making of that film, but these marauders were tasked with not hurting the people, but scaring the crap out of them.
Exactly.
And they would come in, they would steal the people's food that they actually needed for survival. They would start tearing down stuff, and they would tear up things that they built. That's a stress.
Right.
So,
yeah.
What's your favorite way to stress somebody who's training?
My favorite way?
Yes, your favorite.
You can go on to internet and look at Tony Blauer. Tony's Blauer, I think it's Blauer. Tony Blauer has got a thing called the SPEAR system, SPEAR, and he does a really good. It's very, very, very basic. He does a really good way of showing you a basic flinch response that your body knows to do, and no one wants to get put on the front cover of Black Belt magazine doing this flinch response, because you're like, oh no, you just throw your hands up.
Right, but instead of flinching back, you're flinching into a nasty looking punch.
Exactly. Yeah. You're flinching, and from that flinch, what do you do? So your natural response, and then the bridge is what you learn to do next after you've done what you're going to do anyway.
Right. And that's one thing that Hollywood has actually gotten pretty good at showing on a lot of movies. People come back from war, or you got this super combat guy, you got Rambo or somebody, and somebody sneaks up on them, haphazardly, and all of a sudden they wake up and the guy just instantly wakes up and puts them in a chokehold with a knife to their neck.
Right.
Now,
right.
You look at them and their technique is horrible because they're actors, but I mean, that's essentially what the spear technique is teaching them. It's teaching them to flinch in a defensive or actually in an offensive manner.
Right. Because 90-year-old women that go through the windshields of cars and car wrecks, unfortunately that happens, and they don't survive. Of course, who does? But their trauma is on their hands. Their first trauma is on their fingers are broken, their fingers are lacerated. They threw their hands up in time in a 60 mile per hour head-on collision. They're in their, why are they driving? But anyway, after they can drive, they're in their 90s. They throw their hands up. That's how fast you will put your hands up. That's how fast your flinch response is. You're hardwired to protect your mind, your brain, your head. So with that, given that is what you're going to do anyway, let's do it on purpose, and let's sort of figure out what to do next. So that's my favorite thing to do with a person that doesn't have any training at all.
And I'll put a link to the spear system in the show notes for everybody to come back to.
Okay.
So
now it's a bit it's limited. That thing you're going to see on video is a shell of what all you can learn. You try to defend yourself with just that video material, you're probably going to end up, you're not going to be happy with the results.
Well, it's like every other martial arts. I mean, you can teach yourself some moves, but unless you're in good instruction and you're actually training properly, then you're going to end up putting yourself in a worse position, thinking that you know something when you really don't, because you are going to be taken down to your lowest level of training once you're in a stressful situation.
Exactly. What you want with all this stuff, with all the survival tactics, all the things you're doing, you want once in a while to test reality calling your bluff.
Mm-hmm.
Did it really work? Is this really going to be something that did I do it right? And the trademark, the truth. I mean, very often people they will guarantee things, and sometimes the food goes bad. Sometimes the generators don't work properly.
Right. All right. So kind of switch a little bit. Do you think it's more important to have, let's say, a precise skill in shooting, or more important to have the ability to deal with the stress of an attack? Which one would you choose if you could only choose one of the two?
Dealing with the stress of an attack.
Yep. And why would that be?
I'm going to basically directly quote a movie that is very, very truthful. It was called Unforgiven, and the actor that said it was Gene Hackman. And he talked about being able to draw quickly. He pulled his pistol out pretty fast, and he said, "Now, you know what? I can only hit something about 10 feet away." He said, being a good shot, being quick doesn't do any harm, but it's nothing against being cool-headed.
Mm-hmm.
A man that will keep his head, like as not, he'll kill you.
Right. All right, cool. Yeah, I agree with that. It's good to be precise, but if you're used to setting up for 5 minutes before you take your shot, you're probably not going to get that kind of shot. And that's actually, I just posted a video on my blog about, we were having our anniversary, and we went ahead and went shooting during our anniversary.
Yeah.
And the style shooting that I was doing was actually combat style shooting, where you don't focus on your sights or anything like that. You look at the target, you point the gun, and you do multiple shots and that kind of thing. And even that is limited, but it's much better than sitting there and, point, aim, squeeze. This is meant to be a fluid motion.
Right.
And the kickback of your firearm is actually meant, or you're actually supposed to learn to utilize that to prep for the next shot.
Yeah. Okay.
So that kind of goes hand in hand with that. The ability to deal with the stress of an attack is, if somebody's coming at you, you're a much faster shot. You don't have to hit him directly in the heart. You've got a lot of area there.
Yeah, you have to stop him.
Yeah, you just have to stop him.
And then, of course, if you've dealt with the stress before in any sort of a controlled way, hopefully you won't shoot the person 12 times.
Yeah, hopefully not. But you know what? I'm gonna keep my mag full so that I have them if I have to.
Well, yeah.
So don't be coming after me, because if you can't get to me, you might have an entire mag full of bullets coming at you. But let's say somebody wants to, they're in the area, they're in the Jackson area, and they want to train with you. They decide they want to train with you. What would their role be, and what would your role be?
Well, if they come down to the dojo, Futashinka dojo, here on Camel and Highland, if they come down there and they want to take a class with me, it will be Kali, Arnis, Silat type, and I won't be the instructor. It'll be a man named Robin Skirmahorn. And Robin is from the Philippines. The art is exclusively, well, I'm sorry, it's not exclusively. It's Filipino and Indonesian. And what we are going to be doing mostly at first is trying to get in some modicum of good shape. So if you're already in pretty good shape, you'll be able to handle it quite well. Bruce Lee once said, and he did indeed say this. It's not one of those factoids. If you can't run a mile or do 30 push-ups, come back when you can. I'm not going to teach you.
Yeah, it's get in shape before you start trying to learn the finer things.
Right.
And that kind of goes back to what we were saying near the beginning. Is there are two ways of doing it. You can put yourself in a stressful situation, and get used to taking it, or you can make that stressful situation a little less stressful by conditioning your body for it. And if you do both, then you're in a really good position.
Exactly. The I guess at first it takes some time. You sit there, you think, well, gosh, I don't know anything. It's going to take me years and years and years. Well, that's really not true. I think probably 4 to 6 months, and you'll be 10 times better at taking care of yourself than you were.
Well, if someone wanted to just start, they decide that they want to start stress inoculation, where would they start? What are the first steps?
The first steps, we've already covered this, but the first steps is you've got to be able to handle that firing of your blood pressure, that shooting up of your pulse, and the best way to do that is do any sort of high interval training. In other words, jogging won't get it. You've got to do some sort of high stress interval training, and that can be approached in gingerly, so you don't hurt yourself. Of course, as always, the typical caveat is make sure you're in pretty good cardiovascular shape, you're ready for exercise, and what you should do is do something, either punching a punching bag or burpees, and you can look up burpees if you know what a burpee is, or sprints or something where you are having to go from 0 to 90 to 90 nothing within a few seconds, and just see how well you handle that. Because I mean, that is one of the best ways that human beings can get in really good shape. Jogging, a lot of swimming, all those things are really good for you, but they're not going to get you better prepared to handle stress.
Right, right. And a lot of runners, they actually practice doing things like that. They practice doing the Indian runs and stuff where you start all of a sudden, it's a blast for 100 yards, and then you slow down and you go to a walk and rest for a minute, and then you blast and then you rest.
Exactly.
And it's because your body responds to the instant stress. As long as you're warmed up well enough so that you don't injure yourself, your body will grow and build on that a lot faster than it would just a nice leisurely jog.
Exactly. And I'm living proof that your cholesterol will go up, but it's the good cholesterol. Your liver will begin to create energy for your body, which is what it's designed to do, and your good cholesterol will increase.
Right. All right. We already mentioned the Spear System by Tony Blauer, and that kind of brought up another resource that I was thinking about that you actually put in the notes, and that is the Dog Brothers and their Die Less Often series. Tell us a little bit about those guys, because I watched every one of those videos, and it was pretty awesome.
Well, Mark Denny, he's on Facebook. He's actually a constitutional lawyer, so he's fun to have his thoughts appear on your Facebook page once in a while. You all of them, but yeah, he's a fun guy. About 1986, I think, these guys got together and they were doing Kali and a lot of stick fighting, and they were doing a lot of the old traditional drills, and they were wondering, how do we really fight with this stuff? Will this really work? And so they began to do this, and why recreate the pain? You just don't reinvent the wheel. They've already done a lot of material to show where these traditional moves in martial arts can work in actual combat, actual fighting. The Dog Brothers are like the undisputed kings of stress inoculation. And I don't blame anybody for not wanting to do this stuff.
Yeah, those guys, I saw one of the videos, and like some of the videos, it was about knife fighting and just close quarter. And then other ones, they actually brought in the use of a handgun in close quarter combat, and how if you end up bringing a gun to a knife fight, kind of the opposite around, but in close quarter, a knife has a distinct advantage, but they kind of show you how to bring your gun to a distinct advantage and how you can utilize that in a knife fight and still win.
Right. The Dallas Often videos are really, really, really good. But again, there's no guarantee you won't get hurt. There's a fair chance you're going to get a few bumps and bruises, maybe even some jams, and perhaps even a couple of broken bones. So, I mean, I don't blame anybody for not wanting to go that far.
Right. Well, I just thought it was really cool because it's a proof of what I've said. Firing a handgun is a martial art.
Oh, yeah.
Just like every other weapon, it is an extension of yourself, and if you treat it as such and you train just like you would in any other art, then and that's where you get all these precision guys, and then you've got combat, and then you've got just different shooting styles. Everybody's got something different, and they're all tailor-made for their specific scenarios, versus if it's precision shooting or if they're actually in a fight, it's all an art that's been tailored for that. So it's the difference between tournament and a bar fight.
Exactly.
Well, that's all I have. Vaughn, I really appreciate you coming in. Is there anything else that you would like to say?
Ken, thanks for the exposure. I really appreciate the opportunity to get this out to people, and I hope folks will consider it.
All right. Well, thank you, Vaughn. And guys, with that, this is the Prepper Podcast, and I really hope to see you guys next week. Take it easy, Vaughn.
All right, thanks, brother.
And with that, this is Ken Jensen with Vaughn Cassidy, wishing you a very good weekend, and I hope to see you guys next week. This is Ken signing out.